Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, very good, very good. Alhamdulillah. Brother Waqas has just informed me that I have a very short period of time, so I have to try to speak a little faster than a natural southerner like myself generally speak. But I want to talk for a moment about not only the One America campaign, but the role that we as Muslims can play in trying to bring about a genuine spirit of One America in these United States. As all of us know, America is a very unique country. I would not go as far to say that it's an exceptional country, but it's a very unique country. It is a country that leads the world in so many positive and negative social markers. When we look at the size of the military of the United States, we have to recognize that this is the largest military in the world. That military basis overseas that the United States of America constitutes 90% of all countries that have military outposts, a military basis in other parts of the world other than in their own countries. That the United States has this thing called rule of law. For many of us, it's easy to understand when you go to get your passport, there's a charge for the passport, but you don't have to pay the person, the agent, who's helping you under the table to pay them to deliver what would normally be a government service. And so we find that there's a uniqueness about this country that has caused many Muslims to want to come here, sometimes with a false notion that America is Jannah itself, that this is a unique nation that is so good that the streets are paved of gold and everything is fine here in America. But when we really look at the history of this nation, I would dare say that there has seldom, if ever, been a time in the history of the United States that there has been a genuine One America. Look at the history of this nation. Look at the Native American people, what happened with these millions and tens of millions of folks who had lived, being sometimes it's dated that they may have lived in this part of the world for 45, 50,000 years. Look at what happened to this population. Look at the people, the Africans who were brought to this country and enslaved. And after the period of almost 300 years of slavery, then what is euphemistically called Jim Crow laws, but a very rigid structure of division and separation and denial of opportunity for these same people who had been enslaved for so many years. We can look at various populations and various communities in the United States and then ask ourselves, when was America ever united in the way that we as Muslims understand that we should all be working for a common good for this nation? That we have to question ourselves, and my little bit of research, I can't find that period. So we're living in a period now where Muslims, and I don't have to remind anyone about how there's an increasing spike in the incidences of physical violence against men, Muslim men, women, and children. There was an episode in Maryland, perhaps about a year ago, where I was reading where this Muslim sister, I can't remember the city, it was in some suburban city when she was walking through her neighborhood, pushing her baby in a carriage. And some racist thugs jumped out of a car and physically attacked this Muslim sister and knocked over the baby carriage and jumped back in their cars and sped away. Day after day, week after week, month after month, we recognize that this nation has a people problem, and that people problem is primarily manifest that who gets justice in this country are those who can afford to pay for the best kind of justice. That who gets privileges in this country is not for everybody. Forget about the Statue of Liberty standing on Ellis Island in New York talking about bring me your tired and your poor and your wretched. The reality is that more and more on a daily basis, those who are benefiting from the fruits of this nation are getting smaller and smaller, and it's more of a concentration in the hands, and those experiencing these things that are provided by this country are getting fewer and fewer. And so the Muslims, united Muslim organizations, united under the United States Council of Muslim Organizations, have said, well, it's time for us to stand up and do something. That it's time for us to use our creative energy and try to help heal this nation. Let's have programs. Let's bring the people in this country together. And we, as citizens of this land, let's be a part of this effort. We are in a very unique period of human history. As Imam said, that this phenomena, this Donald Trump phenomena, is something that we may not have seen in a number of years. It's not the first time that a raving lunatic who knows nothing about the nuances of political life in this country, it's not the first time that this kind of lunatic, this kind of bigot, has run for the office of president in these United States. But just in the few moments that I have, let me suggest just a few things, concrete and tangible, that USCMO, that ICNA Council for Social Justice, which I am the chair of this board, some practical things, some unique niches that you and I can fill a void. You know, after World War II, when Western Europe was so devastated by bombings and all of these things, that the people of Europe immediately after the bombs stopped dropping, that there were people in Western Europe who were literally starving to death because of the way that the nations of Europe had been so devastated and their infrastructures destroyed. So what did the United States do? The United States passed an act called the European Recovery Act, but it's more popularly known in the history as the Marshall Plan. And what this government did was to allocate $13 billion. And I'm not good at math, but I've been told that if you calculate that to today's value, it would be $130 billion to help revive and restore a devastated Europe after the war. Now, what are we doing? Let's look at some devastation, some ongoing devastation that has resulted from wars of people in this country. Look at the Native American people in the United States. Look at the areas where they live. Look at their reservations. It's an embarrassment for us as a nation to have these original people in this part of the world living in the squalor, living in the death traps that they live on these reservations. So I submit that this is a cause that we as Muslims can take upon ourselves, that we could implement a Marshall Plan for many of these native reservations that they have been so neglected for so many tens and tens of years. Now the Muslims, they are our fellow citizens of this land. And so now the Muslims can look at this people, implement our own version of a Marshall Plan, of Recovery Act, to help restore dignity to a people who were defeated on the battlefield, and now they're being defeated in the process of life because of the conditions that they are living in and because of greed of American corporations. We find that around their reservations in too many places, we have what we can call environmental racism. We have toxic waste, uranium that is trying to come up from the ground, and we have it so loosely dealt with. But the Muslims, that you and I can do something to help these people, like an American Marshall Plan, look at the communities around us. What is going on around us? As Imam Webb has said, how is it that we can read the papers on a day-to-day basis? How is it that we can look at the news and find that so many young teenage African-American young men are being shot down, most of them unarmed, by those who are charged with protecting and serving the people in the areas where they are hard? I'm talking about police departments. As Muslims standing for justice through our masajid, through our organizations, through our individual efforts, we can now shed more light on these injustices in this country. It's not just a good idea. It is a religious imperative. It's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has charged us with. It's a price that we have to pay for citizenship in this country. That if we want to be good citizens, it doesn't mean just paying taxes. It means involving ourselves with our neighbors in helping to find solutions from the problems that this nation is so plagued with. Brothers and sisters, I just end on this note, and that is that with the council, ICNA's Council for Social Justice, we have had a number of brainstorming sessions trying to figure out how can this small entity best reflect, not in a competitive way, but what can we do that reflects the Muslims' concern and involved in the issues of social justice in this country. And I can't say that we've come up with all the solutions, but we do recognize that this council has to be opened up. It can't just be something that we have in one area or two areas. That social justice work is something that as Muslims, many of us are coming late to the party. That for so long we haven't recognized the necessity for us to get involved in social justice issues. But I say that now is the time. It's not tomorrow. That now is the time. So ICNA's Council for Social Justice will ask you, we will ask for your ideas, we'll ask for your involvement, wherever you're living in this country, to join with us. Let us join with you. Let us strengthen our presence on this social justice front around these United States. Brothers and sisters, you and I have an opportunity to write a different storyline for this country as we move forward into the present and into the future. That we have this opportunity to be that community, not that's vilified and people are saying crazy things about us, baseless things about us, but a community that this nation will look at and say, thank God that there were these people called Muslims who put their selfish personal interests above the interests. They didn't put their personal interests above the common good. This is an Islamic principle, that the common good becomes more important than just individual comfort and luxury. So, brothers and sisters, as we move forward, include learning about the history of this nation. Don't just think that you can read a civics book telling us about how great America has been from its inception and think that this is a true narrative. There are many things that must be addressed in this country, and we as an ummah coming from every part of the world, that there's no country on the face of the earth that has a more ethnically and geographically diverse community like we have in this country. So please, during this month of Ramadan, during this time of stopping eating and drinking from dawn to sunset, take time as we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we get more acquainted with His book. Take the time to think about, how can I, as an individual, how can my place of worship, how can the organizations that I belong to involve ourselves more in the social justice struggle? I said that was the last thing, but I have just one other quick point. So bear with me. And I'm saying this because I don't see Brother Wakas. If my time was completely over, he would be standing on the steps coming to pull the mic from me. So he's not there, so I'll say one other thing, make one other point. And this is a point, this is a factual, historical point. During the 1960s, beginning in 1966, which was a very socially turbulent time in the United States, there were a number of movements, like a women's movement, like a Black Power movement, the end of the Civil Rights movement, a Native American movement. There were so many things going on. But this organization that was formed in 1966, called the Black Panther Party, started a program of feeding children coming from underprivileged homes, feeding them breakfast before they went to school every morning. And they called this program simply a free breakfast program. This was one organization that many in the country just hated these people because they were monitoring the police. They were carrying guns when it was lawful to carry them, all for whatever reason. But because of the efforts of one organization, the federal government of the United States of America implemented a free breakfast program from coast to coast, from north to south. And this program was started by a singular organization. One last example was from the same organization. African American people, for the most part in this country, had never even heard of sickle cell anemia. It was something that was out of sight, out of mind. We may have been suffering from the disease, but didn't know it was misdiagnosed. The Black Panther Party, one organization, started clinics where they were offering free sickle cell testing. And the federal government adopted this kind of testing. Sickle cell is a blood disease that affects people from West Africa in particular and Northern Africa. It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave people in these climates as a protection against malaria and other blood-bound diseases, but taken out of that physical environment and placed over here. clots like cells like sickles would block the arteries and block the veins. It's a very painful disease. I mentioned these two examples. Don't think that you and I cannot make significant impact on the quality of life of any given people in this country. Assalamu alaikum.